in public. Before we get going, there's just a grammatical correction that we need to make. In the last meeting, Mr. Serre presented a motion, or rather an amendment, and in the text, there's a reference to Gabriel Bourdon, but the name of the witness is Nicolas. So you may see the correction that is made on that. Mr. Beaulieu, you had your hand up. Go ahead. Well, we're resuming debate on the motion that we were dealing with during the last meeting. So when we adjourn, the motions are, they belong to the entire committee because we had a motion from Mr. Genereux that was adjourned. Debate on it rather was adjourned on Monday. So as long as there's no proposal to move them, they belong to all members of the committee. So it's no longer the author of the, or the initial owner of the motion that is in charge. But we were dealing with a motion during the last meeting. That's what I'm talking about. But there's no debate. We're going to vote on it. Is everyone following? So Mr. Beaulieu is suggesting that we come back to the exact point where we left off, to the 1064 meeting on Monday. So no debate on that. We're going to vote unless this is a point of order. Mr. Chair, this is not a point of order, just trying to understand it because you asked us if we are all following. I just want to make sure that the committee is now going to move forward to discuss the amendment by Mr. Serre. Exactly, yes, we were talking about the amendment.
We can vote. Yes, go ahead with the vote.
Pour la reprise du débat.
So we're voting on the motion that we adjourned on. Mr. Drouin.
Est-ce qu'il y a des gens qui sont en désaccord?
Is anyone opposed? Microphone, please.
En faveur.
Monsieur Iacono?
On est en faveur.
Pour.
Non.
Madame Koutrakis?
En faveur.
Monsieur Sanson?
Moi, je trouve que l'amendement est très, très bon, donc je suis en faveur.
Oui,
Monsieur Serré?
on envoie sur l'amendement.
Monsieur Dalton?
Oui.
Monsieur Généreux?
Oui.
Monsieur Godin?
Oui.
Madame Cousy?
Oui.
Monsieur Beaulieu?
On est pour débattre.
Madame Ashton?
Ah oui. On va...
Oui.
Pour 11 contre 0.
Donc voilà, nous sommes...
Very well. And now we'll come back to the amendment moved by Mr. Serre, the one we debated last Monday evening. So, Mr. Beaulieu, go ahead, please. I do not agree with the amendment because we don't know where the chair should apologize. I think it is the MP who should apologize, and I think it distorts the meaning of the motion. Thank you, Mr. Beaulieu. Anything else to add? No. Basically, what I see is that we're going to get ourselves into debate because of systematic obstruction, because Liberal MPs absolutely do not want the majority to vote, but the majority shall vote. And I believe that what we are asking for is there be a resignation from the committee and a resignation from the Assemblée parlementaire, the Canadian section of the Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie. So those two parts are not in the amendment. So I think it distorts the motion. I think it is the MP who swore. Mr. Godin? Thank you, Chair. Indeed, you can well understand that I cannot agree with this motion. The Seri amendment completely changes the meaning of the initial motion. That's the first thing. And the second thing, we should understand that I, as a member of the committee, should not have to apologize. I am not going to ask the chair to apologize on behalf of all of the members of the committee. Second thing, Chair, and I invite everybody to analyze this, I do not think it is in order because it's very distant from the original idea in the original motion. For that reason, I think it's out of order. And I would, in fact, like the chair to rule on that. Is this amendment in order or not? And this before we debate it, because otherwise we're going to waste time. And all of the opposition parties want to move on to something else in the best interests of francophones in minority situations. We don't want to do filibustering. We want to resolve the problem. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Godin. Now you've put me in a difficult situation. You've asked about whether the amendment is in order, but I've already ruled on the original motion. It's black and white. Neither this committee, not even the chair, and there is a great deal of flexibility for the chair, cannot reprimand, sanction, censor a member. That happens elsewhere, not in the committee. So already I ruled the motion was out of order, but the committee challenged the chair's ruling, and I am not taking that personally. That's part of the rules. I don't see that as a lack of confidence in your chair. So now I'm being asked about whether this amendment is in order or not. So as a chair, I think we've softened the motion to really see to it that it is in order. So I believe it is entirely in order because if it's somewhat changed the motion to give it to make sure that it is in order. So for the reasons I've explained, I believe it's in order. Mr. Chair, you're actually coming back on a decision made by the committee. You say that the initial motion was not in order, but the committee decided it was in order, so it is in order at this time. The chair's ruling was challenged, but it was not part of the original ruling. It was the result of a challenge. I still believe it's out of order, but you ruled my ruling wrong. So I'm not going to repeat the reasons. Now you ask me to rule on whether the amendment was in order. Mr. Beaulieu? Chair, if you decide that this amendment is in order, I'm going to challenge your decision and ask for a vote on that. If you're asked, there will be no discussion if you're asking for the vote. So to be absolutely clear for everyone, we have people on the speakers list. You can't call for a vote when you have people on the speakers list. According to our procedure, the chair is being challenged, so we have to immediately move to a vote. What is the point then of you chairing. We have procedures. Here we have chaos. Why have this green book if we're going to continue to challenge the chair's rulings? There are rules to follow, and the opposition is systematically breaking the rules to get what they want. That's what's happening here. Well, I cannot pass judgment on what you're saying. All I can say is that we've triggered a procedure in our rules book. A chair's decision can be challenged. That is what our procedure is that's been triggered. So we have a vote on whether an amendment is in order or not. But challenging amendments before we even debate them, I find we're on a slope. And I'm addressing all the members around this table. We're on a slope. I wouldn't say anti-democratic, but not far. This is an opinion, a chair's opinion. Yes, you can move amendments, you can debate them. But before even debating an amendment, I find that a bit dangerous. So the vote's been called. So are we upholding or not the decision of the chair? We are going to vote now. If we take into account the Green Book, there is mention of whether the original motion was in order or not. I mean, if you have a minority here that's always going to lose a vote, then you have an amendment that's moved to see to it that the original motion is in order. And then what is the committee entitled to do? We have not even debated the amendments. We haven't even debated that. And now we're voting on a challenge on the chair's ruling. And we're saying that, the intention of the amendment was to make the motion more acceptable. I appreciate the question you raised, but the procedure has already been triggered on a challenge to the chair. We are now debating. According to the procedure in your Green Book, it is written in there that if you challenge the chair, you immediately move to the vote. And I have called for the vote. Yes, but there have been point of orders on the procedure, so I will listen to those. My point of order is that it seems that the majority decides. That's democracy. And you said it was not in order. We disagreed. We had a different interpretation. I mean, no one owns the truth, but we voted on that. Now, you're saying even if the majority rejected the out-of-order character of the motion, it's still out of order. So I think it's up to the majority. Then if even if we don't like the majority to take it, we just have to accept it. Mr. Drouin, on the same point of order, unfortunately for Mr. Buller, we have a constitution, and that constitution protects the Francophone minority, by the way. So point of order, we talk about the Green Book, but we're breaking the rules in the Green Book. I find that ironic. We can move to the vote, but I find it ironic that there's reference to the Green Book at the very same time as you're breaking the rules in the Green Book. Before we vote, I'm going to remind everyone what we're voting on. The amendment proposed by Mr. Serret is as follows. On Mr. Beaulieu's motion, given the obscene and offensive comments made by the Liberal MP from Glengarry Prescott Russell to a witness defending the cause of the French language of Quebec, the committee, and here's the amendment, ask the chair on behalf of the committee to apologize in writing to the witness Frédéric Lacroix and Nicolas Bourdon regarding the events that took place May 6th. That is the amendment. Point of order. If I've understood, every amendment that is moved, if the opposition doesn't like it, because we're in a minority, everything's going to be out of order. We're not even getting the opportunity to debate an amendment because they understand. I think this is unacceptable. I'm going to suspend in a minute. That was not a point of order. That happens often. You use the point of order when it's not a point of order. Now I'm going to suspend the meeting.
Mr. Godin, you asked me to decide on whether the amendment is in order. I did that. And then you asked to vote to challenge the chair's decision. We will do that. But before we do that, I will explain to you why I arrived at the conclusion I did. So I'll refer to page 541 of the Green Book. And now we're talking about an amendment because that's what's at stake. An amendment needs to be drafted, and now there's a reference to the House of Commons, but committees also rely on the same procedure. So an amendment needs to be drafted in such a way as to, if it is accepted, should be intelligible and coherent, and an amendment is to be ruled out of order in the following cases. 1, it does not relate to the main motion. In other words, it relates to another subject than the main motion, and it deviates from the main issue at hand or refers to another distinct issue with pre-notice, and two, an amendment is in order if it brings before the committee a relevant question as the one that was raised during the same session, or another motion that's already adopted. Three, on being out of order. It is out of order if it's completely against the main motion, or if it would mean, if it would cause the same effect as the rejection of the main motion. So that is what the book says on whether this amendment would be in order or out of order. So as a result, it is in order, and we're now going to vote. I'll hand it over to our clerk. So we're voting on the following question. Shall the decision of the chair be sustained?
Maintenu. Monsieur Drouin. Monsieur Iacono.
Excusez, je comprends pas parce que là, je suis un peu confus de la façon que je vais voter oui ou non. Qu'est-ce que ça va amener? Alors, pourrez-vous me l'expliquer, s'il vous plaît, Monsieur le Président?
En fait, c'est que
Well, in fact, I made a decision, Mr. Iacono. Mr. Godin was asking if Mr. Serre's amendment was in order. The amendment, we're not talking about Mr. Beaulieu's motion. So is Mr. Serre's amendment in order? I ruled that it is in order for the reasons I've explained. Okay, thank you.
Madame Koutrakis.
En faveur.
Monsieur Sanson.
Oui, d'accord.
Monsieur Serré.
En faveur.
Monsieur Dalton.
contre.
Monsieur Généreux.
Contre.
Monsieur Godin.
Contre.
Madame Cousy. Monsieur Beaulieu.
Contre.
Madame Ashton.
Contre.
Monsieur Sanson. Parfait.
Je juste dire le résultat.
Oui, allez-y avec le résultat, Madame Légreffière.
Pour 5 contre 6.
Donc, la décision.
So the decision is challenged. A point of order, go ahead. There is an issue with Parlview. There is no video feed. So there's no video feed on Parlview. Okay, I'm being told that the audio functions and they're working on the video feed. Should we suspend? Okay, we're going to suspend just a second. We're suspended.
moi aussi.
Okay, so I'll just relay the information that I've been provided almost at the same time. So it looks as if it's not very uncommon that this type of problem occurs. And I'm being told that there are some meeting rooms where there aren't cameras even. So this is a technical issue that we're trying to resolve, but we can continue the meeting with the audio feed only until the problem is resolved. And there are committees that go public with no camera, no video feed anyways. So just as a reminder, the ruling of the chair has been challenged on the admissibility of Mr. Serre's amendment. So it has been ruled by the committee that the amendment is out of order against the chair's ruling. Mr. Sanson, go ahead. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. And once again, I'd have to say that I'm disappointed that we don't have a video feed. I mean, I wouldn't really be interested in watching a TV program without a video feed. So good luck to those who are tuning in. It's really not the same thing. I would even be against having this discussion. I'd like to move another amendment that I think might help us make progress on the question before us. And it will go to enrich Mr. Beaulieu's motion. I think it's being circulated, being distributed. Have you received it? No, I haven't yet, in both official languages. Our clerk is going to take care of that, so we should have it soon.
Faites-moi signe quand.
Let me know when you are ready for me to go ahead and read the amendment.
Heureusement, on a du personnel terrible.
Fortunately, we have really efficient staff members around us, so we're getting that done.
Okay, on va suspendre un petit bout de temps.
We're going to suspend while that's being done.
reprenons, tout le monde prend sa place.
We're going to reconvene. One moment, please. Is everyone seated? Do you have a point of order, Mr. Beaulieu? This one is not any more in order than the previous amendments. So that is my point of order. It is completely changing the meaning. Let's let Mr. Sanson move his amendment. But just before that, I would like to remind Mr. Godin, Mr. Sanson, that we are now back in public with the cameras working. So in camera is Latin, but it has nothing to do with cameras. What we're referring to is the chamber, in chamber. So don't get confused between in camera and cameras that take photos. So we're back in public with audio and the cameras rolling. So, Mr. Sanson, would you like to explain it? I just have to find it, says Mr. Sanson. First, I want to say that I'm very pleased that we're back on television and no longer just on the radio, which, in my opinion, is very necessary for us to continue our work here. And as you will have been able to read, and given the offensive and injurious words spoken by the Liberal MP from Glengarry, Prescott and Russell to a witness defending the cause of the French language in Quebec, be it resolved that the committee write to the clerk of the Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie, Section canadienne, to call a meeting to vote on the presidency of the Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie, Section canadienne. I believe that this amendment serves to strengthen my colleague MP Beaulieu's motion. We're providing the committee with some tools to extend a hand to arrive at a solution to this problem that this committee has been working on for some 9 years now in very close collaboration to advance the cause of the francophonie. And I think that this amendment enriches the motion, and it is for this reason that I have moved the amendment at this time. Thank you. Mr. Beaulieu, you were the first. All right, then. Any other comments? Mr. Drouin is next on my list. Go ahead. On the amendment moved by my dear colleague, we all know very well that the Official Languages Committee does not have any, power over any association, the Canada, United Kingdom, or the Commonwealth Association. That I know that the opposition is a member of, which is contradictory, but that's their problem. Now, speaking to the amendment, the Committee on National Defense, for instance, let's say an association that has to do with NATO. Well, a committee can simply not speak to the doings of another association. Canadian Heritage, for instance, same thing. The committee cannot, talk about an association. So when this motion was presented, there were members here who were not even members of the Assemblée parlementaire de francophonie, and they were being asked to vote on something that they were not even a member of. So in principle, we know that the APF, it's only the members who can speak to that, and an MP is free to speak or join an association. And I think that Mr. Sanson's amendment is in order. This committee on official languages has no powers whatsoever when it comes to parliamentary associations. I think the Sanson amendment corrects this thing that was not in order. And then, of course, your ruling was challenged. Moreover, the members will vote tonight. So if the Committee on Official Languages wants to speak to this, you could write to the clerk or to its vice president seated at my right. I think that would be more reasonable and more appropriate than compared to something that is not in order as you have ruled. And I'll end here. But I do have a question. I don't know the extent to which it is reasonable to invite members of political parties to come and present before you have speaking to the amendment. I find it bizarre that was done and with a lack of transparency. I'll end here. Mr. Serré. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, MP Sanson, for moving this amendment. This amendment is in keeping with the rules, and it does give the power for the committee to speak out. We all agree that Mr. Drouin's comments were not acceptable. We all said it, and Mr. Drouin apologized on 7 occasions. On 7 occasions, he apologized to the 2 witnesses. So I don't know what else the opposition is looking for here. In fact, Chair, you put on the agenda that we were to examine the economic development. Well, it was a report that we were to examine. So I'm going to try to stay positive, but I find it curious that the opposition says it wants to move forward with our meetings. And here we are to submit amendments because we did have a minister attend for another separate study on post-secondary education. And I would like to invite my colleague to stick to the topic of the amendment, the Mr. Sanson's amendment. Thank you, Chair. I understand why Mr. Godin is very uncomfortable with the facts, because when we talk about the reason for Mr. Sanson's amendment and for it being moved, and we examine what kind of powers we have as a committee, on 2 occasions, the chair has ruled on amendments. And here we are in a minority situation, so with every vote, we end up at the losing end. Now, speaking to Mr. Sanson's amendment, per se, I think it is clear that Mr. Sanson is proposing solutions to end the debate so that we can move on. For instance, immigration, Francophone immigration has become, permanent. It's a fact. The government has done this. We can be discussing this. So talking about this amendment with regard to the chief government whip and their limitations. I mean, and here I'm president of Parlaméricas. We have members here on Canada France. And so once again, Mr. Sanson's amendment speaks to where we do have some power as a committee. And it is what we have happening here is political game playing to try to win seats in Quebec, trying to see how we can talk about the issue of the French language. Mr. Drouin said that the words spoken by the two witnesses were extremist. But another member of the committee, just last week or this week, I mean, I asked that that person make a public apology. So then an MP, an Anglophone MP in the chamber was called to be extremist. Now, that's more than what Mr. Drouin said. Mr. Drouin said the words spoken were extreme. And that's why Mr. Sanson's amendment is important, because as a francophone, especially in Northern Ontario, we've often heard comments made by separatists or elitists, comments that are offensive, as we've said on numerous occasions. So when we talk here about measures that we can take as a committee, and then we look at what Mr. Sanson suggests, and we think, what can a committee do? And so we can call on our chair to write a letter to an association. But based on Mr. Godin, we cannot call for someone to resign. So this is all just political gamesmanship. So it's because the Québécois is not content with 32 seats. They want more. So they're going to try to appeal to this national sentiment rather than just say, well, why can't we just work together? We have members of the committee who've sent their kids to English schools. We have political party leaders in the National Assembly of Quebec who have studied in Francophone institutions in Quebec. So this morning on Radio-Canada, there is, topics on post-secondary education in the rest of the country. We have problems.
There are studies, and we looked into this during the break week. We looked into this on Monday. So it's only a political issue for the Bloc to be able to gain additional seats. Now, the leader of the Conservatives is also burning everything, but there are 10 Conservative MPs in Quebec, and you are really spoiled in Quebec. You studied in French. When you look at the motion moved by Mr. Samson, it is a way to end the debate here, which is, again, only focused on seeking votes in the province of Quebec. And this discussion is to the detriment of Francophones outside of Quebec. We have a letter from the Franco-Ontarian Association, which is very clear, that goes hand in hand with Mr. Sanson's motion. And point of order, Mr. Chair. Just a second, Mr. Serra. Ms. Ashton, go ahead. Chair, I think it is clear that the Liberals are engaging in a filibuster once again. And as someone who speaks French and lives outside the province of Quebec, I find this generalization a bit tiring. And I hope that we'll be able to get back to debating the motion. And I really hope that we'll get to vote so that we make our positions known and carry on with the committee's work. We are really tired, and let us respect everyone's time. Let's move ahead and end this filibuster. Ms. Ashton, unfortunately, this was not a point of order. The procedure is clear on that, and we've all quite a bit of experience in Parliament. As long as it is relevant to the motion, we're actually here talking about Mr. Sampson's amendment to Mr. Beaulieu's motion, but as long as there are people who want to speak to it, they cannot stop them. It's in the rules of procedure. Are they a bit too lenient? Well, it is up to the House of Commons that we have appropriate procedure, but for the time being, I have to carry on with the rules that are known to all of us. So I have to say that Mr. Serre is still on Mr. Sampson's amendment. I don't see how I can rule otherwise. And in any case, you've seen me in other meetings and other debates where I remind politely to people to get back to the motion if they stray too far away from the essence. But our rules dictate that we need to be more permissive than restrictive. If that is, if some people don't like this, unfortunately, that doesn't change the state of things. And we are going to continue to hear from Mr. Serre on the amendment by Mr. Sampson. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Ms. Ashton, for your contribution. Well, that is exactly the point. We want to go back to committee work. We had the minister on the post-secondary institution study here. And Ms. Ashton, the filibuster took place when Mr. Godin moved his out-of-order motion 2 weeks ago, Tuesday or Thursday, while we had the minister for a different study. Now we're gathered here to work on the draft report on the economic development of official language minority communities. So I'd like to reach out to extend my hand to the NDP, to the Bloc, and to the Conservatives. If we are to talk about a filibuster, well, what we want to do, rather, is get back to doing our regular committee work rather than concentrate our energy and spend our time on a personal attack against a member. What Mr. Sampson is trying to do with this amendment is exactly that. A parliamentary committee has never seen this before. This has never been done before. So I am extending my hand out to Ms. Ashton, to the Bloc Québécois, to the Conservatives, to move on to something else. Because we have an opportunity to say we do not agree with what Mr. Drouin has done and move on. It's exactly what Mr. Sampson is trying to do. And once again, this is abusing the powers of the committee by 3 political parties against the minority of Liberals on this side of the table. So Mr. Sampson, with his motion, is trying to fix the situation so that we can move on. We tried to do the same thing with the motion before this, but the 3 parties challenged the chair's ruling once again. So it seems that the objective of the majority here at the committee is to completely disregard parliamentary rules and procedure, Mr. Chair, and asking you to keep opening the Green Book, which is our Bible here in the committees. And despite referring to the book, they've actually broken the rules in the Green Book 3 times now. So, with this amendment, we're aiming to authorize the committee to write to the Secretariat of the APF to let them know that we don't agree with the words that were used. Because Mr. Drouin is widely respected at the international level within the APF as well. And Mr. Drouin's words, or rather the word extremist was also used. But when it comes to research institutions, it's not politicians who decide who gets the money. It's a group of scientists that does that. And it shouldn't be up to politicians. So Mr. Bourdon and Mr. Lacroix, their words were not appropriate. And there are many Francophones who agree with the objection to those words. And I think Mr. Lacroix is clear on his stance with regard to immigration, that he doesn't want it. It's a point of view. And Mr. Sanson moved this amendment, and we had comments from Ms. Ashton and then Mr. Godin and Mr. Beaulieu. We need to start talking about important things. We had Minister Boissonnault here. And this morning we have the report on economic development to work on, but they decided to play political games and cause chaos at the committee. That is why Mr. Sanson moved this amendment. And Mr. Godin was saying this is not personal. But the motion is quite personal. The motion is asking the committee to remove a member, a highly respected member of the committee who made a mistake and who has apologized 7 times. So the logic behind this amendment by Mr. Sanson is to find a solution to the problem we are faced with so that we can assume our responsibility. But once again, we're seeing political games to seek votes in Quebec to the detriment of Francophones outside the province. That is why Mr. Sanson's amendment is important for us to be able to put an end to this, because what the opposition is trying to do in relation to Mr. Drouin's words is not is not possible. So we had the incident. Apologies were issued. Now, Mr. Sanson, with this amendment, is really trying to give us a way out of this situation. And we had comments from Minister Roberge on the decline of French yesterday, and there were comments on social media, but who was it in the committee that actually drew our attention to this issue? Well, it was Mr. Drouin, and it's a problem that the International Francophonie is looking into, and this is why they covered on social media as well. So Mr. Sanson is trying to find a solution, and we have to really find a solution. We really have to get back to our study rather than attack a member. The motion that was moved is quite personal. And there's even a request that the whips get involved, which has never been done. And we had Ms. Thomas, MP Thomas, who who spoke on the Heritage Committee of all the committees and said what she said. Should she be removed? Because she asked the minister to speak English. A Conservative MP did that. And what did Ms. Thomas do? She said, I apologize, I made a mistake, and she apologized. She did that once. She did that in the committee. She did not do it publicly as Mr. Drouin did. Think about that for a second. At the Heritage Committee, we had a Conservative MP who said, speak English, and with no repercussions. But now, here we have Mr. Drouin, who was called an extremist. It's really not acceptable, Mr. Chair. Mr. Samson is trying to find a solution with this amendment because it's simply a personal attack to a great defender of Canadian and international francophonie, strictly for political gain, for votes. They are not happy with the 32 seats they have in Quebec. They want more, and Conservatives, well, Mr. Poilievre is burning it all down. And as a result, it's chaos in all committees, and here we're facing the same situation. And I sit on the Heritage Committee as well. We're working on the Court Challenges program, but Conservatives do not want to hear any of it. So it's important for us to find a way out of this. We should stop attacking a proud Francophone and move on to our important studies. And Mr. Godin was referring to, well, he had a saying, a buddy is a buddy, but it has nothing to do with that. We're faced with personal attacks against an MP, so the motion that was moved by the Conservatives and the Bloc is not acceptable. The only aim here is to attack an individual who has apologized 7 times now. And the opposition didn't even give him the chance. Mr. Drouin had a hard time finding the opportunity to apologize. That's why Mr. Sanson brought forward the amendment. And there's a request for him to apologize to the committee. So we had political games from the get-go.
And next, what are we going to see? Ministers showing up here? Now, I support Mr. Sanson's amendment because we have to stop this debate here, stop these personal attacks, and we have to examine what the committee's entitled to do. And if the motion is not in order and is a complete abuse of the powers of the majority in opposition, I think, this has to stop. Now, Mr. Chair, for these reasons, I think we should vote in favor of Mr. Monson's motion and get back to our business at hand this morning, which is to examine our report on economic development, and then also go back to examine post-secondary education and all our other issues on which we are working on together. Because we have worked very closely together in this committee, and now there are political games being played to attack an individual, and this outside of the parameters of a committee, which is unacceptable. There are other things we will be able to refer to later on. I want to remain positive and extend my hand to the Bloc, to the Conservatives, so that we can get back to our important work. I mean, something happened here, and there was a candidate, a Bloc member. So this is, a question of opinion. Thank you. And second time I mentioned this in committee, there is another member who called another member an extremist. Mr. Drouin never even did that much. And that MP had 3 days to apologize, and it was not done. And I asked him last week to apologize. It was not done. Mr. Serre, in order. Ms. Ashton? Now, Mr. Sampson, did you signal me for another matter? All right. Ms. Ashton? No, Ms. Ashton had her hand up before she called the point of order. Thank you. Yes, indeed, I had raised my hand. But I will keep my comments brief because I would like us to vote on the amendment. First, I would like to say that we are opposed to the amendment. This is straying away from the intent of the motion. We do have powers as a committee to take position on the conduct of one of our members, and we hope that either the Liberal whip or the Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie would take actions reflecting the desires of the committee and take the kind of action that reflects the fact that we believe the conduct of the member of the committee unacceptable. But last time I talked about the arrogance of politicians. And it was not all right to say something and then apologize and say, it's all over, let's just move forward. No. That's not how you resolve the kind of situation we experienced 2 weeks ago. So I want to talk about the Liberal arrogance, because I think that is what we are seeing here. We're seeing Liberal members who are protecting one of their members who harmed not only the reputation of the committee, but also is trying to hide a rather difficult situation in our country where the French language is in decline. And yes, we have the legislation to modernize, and yes, the actions taken in our committee. But let's be honest, what we have heard from members of this committee is minimizing the testimony of witnesses who have very serious concerns about the decline of the French language in the province of Quebec, the most francophone province in our country. So we cannot pretend that it was a moment of passion or lack of judgment, etc., etc. No, let's speak the truth. We have a big problem in Canada, a country that states it is proudly bilingual, but we have a decline of the French language, and this decline continues. And this during the Liberal government of almost 10 years now. And rather than say, well, we're going to take this seriously, we're not going to ignore witnesses who are talking about serious issues. Instead, we're talking about absolutely anything here. We're not questioning how the MP in question is defending the rights of Franco-Ontarians. Absolutely not. But I find it extremely insulting to see that what is unfolding is an insult of Francophones outside of Quebec. I've heard from very respectable Francophone outside of Quebec witnesses who would never have considered witnessing in front of this committee with the members it has because of the conduct of this committee. And it wasn't a Quebecer who said this. It was a Francophone from outside of Quebec, a well-respected Francophone. Now, Liberals are once again showing arrogance. You don't have a monopoly on the issue. And more seriously, if you want to ignore the fact that the testimony actually was speaking about the decline of French and what we needed to do in the face of that decline, and what we're doing here is making a circus of this committee. I've seen the Liberal responses on numerous occasions, and I think it harms our modesty as a country. Now, when we're all here passionate about the matter of decline of French in our communities, in our country, and that we're witnessing this circus, I have to wonder, do members really want to continue to chair the Assemblée parlementaire de la francophonie? I don't know how somebody who has that kind of conduct can represent someone outside of Canada, having minimized the testimony of Francophones outside of Quebec who said we've got serious problems and that need to be taken seriously. I don't know how this MP can continue to do this with integrity. And as members of the committee, yes, we all want to sit in the committee, but it's up to the Liberals to decide. I was here when Ms. Papadopoulos was, shunted aside for having said much less. I don't know if that's sexism or other issues came into play, but you see the Liberals protect one of their members who, I would say, harmed the reputation of the committee, but more importantly, insulted the testimony, even if you're in disagreement on a number of points. But it addressed one of the most important matters for this committee. What do we do about the decline of French? And so I'm shocked by the Liberal arrogance that we've been witnessing for weeks now. And I hope that we are going to move ahead with the vote on this amendment as quickly as possible. And as to the motion to take position, know that others also have to take position. But I will not accept the Liberal arrogance we are seeing once again today. And for the well-being of our community, for our children who are going to schools who don't have enough teachers, there's not enough educators in our child care centers. We need to be able to advance on the important issues. Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Ashton. And now Mr. Sanson, followed by Mr. Beaulieu. Thank you, Chair. I can certainly thank my NDP colleague who is talking about the importance of advancing the crucial work in this committee. And this is exactly what we're trying to do with this amendment. It's to extend a hand. It is to get back to work. I've reached the point where I'm wondering if I'm really at ease in this committee. And if we're not, actually addressing what has been most important to me in my life, that is to defend the rights of, Quebecers. There's nothing more important than education. That is the top topic. My colleague talks about the importance. My NDP colleague refers to a motion to deal with early childhood education. Now, if the opposition is not willing to extend its hand, well, we'll never get there. And what does this mean? It's a minority government. We don't know what is going to happen. We do want answers. We want the government to be able to act on recommendations that are going to, nurture what we're trying to do. My amendment is aimed at that, finding a way to move forward. Monday last, at our meeting, I asked the opposition to light up, their candles and try to find the light for their communities. They didn't light up their candles. Maybe they can use the flashlight on their phones. I have much respect for everyone around this table. Mr. Généreux is a proud Quebecer. He's a defender of his community. And he has given of himself with a huge amount of energy. He has defended, since 2015, the rights of francophones. Since 2009, in fact. Longer than some others here. So he has defended the French language and the workers in the face of the decline of the French language in Quebec. He knows well the minority situation that exists for some groups across Canada. So why doesn't he choose today to follow that light and the continuity? He has his heart in the right place. Now, because of the position of his party leader, and I don't know what else, but maybe if he wants to speak to his amendment, he could expand on this. I'm trying to understand, how can we work for the cause for 15 years and then suddenly say, I'm not interested in communities, francophone communities all across Canada right at this time, because there's something else that's more important. And that we start, to hunt, as I referred to the other day, to the soldiers. I'm surprised. And Mr. Beaulieu believes in the importance of education. He was the one who raised the importance of the study on post-secondary education. And that's been a difficult situation for many years, because there was no continuum. It was, age 5 to 18, the school age. So there are opportunities to make progress, and I'm simply trying to find a way out so that we can be proud of the work we do, and so that we continue to do that work. And I'll be very honest with you, Chair. In the discussions I've had with the community organizations, both the Francophone and the Acadian organizations, and they are disappointed. I can't say how much correspondence I've received this year, encouraging us to do the work on the post-secondary and to do the work that Ms. Ashton has been calling on us to do regarding early childhood. We know that the government is investing huge amounts of money in support of families, and our youngsters in Nova Scotia, some $18 million additional dollars to create 9,500 spaces, childcare spaces. Imagine, in our tiny province, 9,500 spaces. That's extremely important. So important that we ensure that, that we be able to dedicate some of those childcare spaces to Francophone communities.
Because if you open English childcare services in these communities, Francophone communities, then it's harder for them because they want to keep the friendships and the relationships they've built, and they tend to go to English language schools. So this is extremely important. And my colleague from Quebec City, Pont-Neuf, has been working with us since 2019. And I know that his heart is in the right place. He wants to help us. He understands the importance of education for society. And he talks to me about early childhood education quite often. And Ms. Ashton is also proposing the same thing. So, Mr. Chair, my amendment aims to find a solution. People might say, well, it's an amendment that's not really important, but it is very important because we are asking the committee to do something that is within its powers. This committee can write to the clerk to ask something. But what the committee cannot do, and I find it surprising, is execute the demands of Mr. Beaulieu's amendment, asking the whips to do certain actions or asking the other organization to take some action. So what I'm proposing is within the committee's purview. My colleague who brought forward the amendment on which we voted but in fact it's not the amendment and that's important for them. It's about attacking the reputation of an MP that has done extraordinary work for several years now. And my colleague made a point. Are we in the habit of inviting former candidates of political parties? Because we had a couple of weeks ago a witness who was at one point in time a candidate for the bloc. I just mentioned that to give you an idea of the bloc ideology. And I'm looking to the other side of the table. Maybe Mr. Beaulieu would like to take the floor after me. He might want to apologize to our liberal colleague that he called an extremist. If Mr. Beaulieu apologizes, then it's okay for me. And I believe that our colleague would be very happy to accept his comments and his apology. That's how we work. Ms. Ashton referred to a monopoly, but I'm wondering if the opposition isn't trying to play political games. We had Mr. Boissonnault with us, and if I remember correctly, we had the minister for the first hour of our committee meeting, and then we also had his team of officials. Had we spent the first hour actually hearing from the minister, then at least that would have been something. And I could have said, well, they did not play political games. If they had done that afterwards, I would have said, okay, at least we heard from the minister. But Mr. Boissonnault, the minister, will not be able to come back due to his schedule. If I understand that correctly, Mr. Chair, that information was provided to us by the clerk. We had correspondence from the minister's office. And I'm wondering if the minister would be able to come back if he knew that we are actually working on the files before us. So it's really difficult to get things done if the opposition is not willing to support my motion to put an end to this. And our colleague has apologized 7 times. I know that Mr. Beaulieu would also be looking to apologize for his comments as well. But the leader of the opposition, and you were all there in the House, he did what he did, and he is yet to apologize. He was removed from the chamber because he did not apologize, not because of what he did and what he said, not because of his words, but because of his refusal to accept the request of the Speaker of the House of Commons because he had used unacceptable language. So, on the one hand, we have someone who apologizes 7 times, but on the other hand, a second individual who refuses to apologize. Someone needs to explain how this all works. I don't understand. So, look at yourselves in the mirror and think about the work that's before us. It would be a pleasure for me to keep being a member of this committee. For me, it was by choice. It was not imposed on me. So I chose to be here. And I'm looking at the work we've done, which has led to significant changes. But if one day I retire and we haven't finished the early childhood study and we haven't finished a study that is of the highest importance for me on education, then that will be disappointing because it's been 33, 34 years that Francophones outside Quebec have had the right to manage their school boards. It was in the early 90s, and that was one of the biggest victories for Francophones outside Quebec. As I've said multiple times, education is of key importance for a society. And if after more than 35 years, and we recognize this, and we often see a lack of funding in Francophone school boards outside Quebec, and I used to be a general manager for more than 10 years, so it's not really easy to sit at that table with directors of Anglophone school boards as one of the only or few Francophone school board representatives and find ways for a prosperous future for our young students. So leaving this place in however many years and knowing that we haven't made progress or finished the early childhood study or the education study, that would be very hard for me, knowing that we were so close, but we lost it because we wanted to play political games and play petty politics. That would be a hard pill to swallow. We have our analyst with us since 2010, almost the same length of time as Mr. Généreux. Our analyst has been supporting this committee, has been guiding us since 2010. And she knows the importance of the studies that are before us. When do you think we'll be able to finish these studies, is my question to the opposition? By the end of June? Will we have meetings then? Maybe we'll ask to have additional emergency meetings, urgent meetings with the commissioner, maybe, and then we'll have to work all summer to make up for the time that we have lost. We have community groups and school boards across Canada who are tuning in, following us, listening to us, and they've been waiting to see progress. And what they see is almost that we almost got to the discussion table where they could come and present their positions to this committee. They could explain to this committee their strengths, their challenges, the difficulties, and there have been many success stories. With their contribution, we could enrich our report, our study. And then we can take a look at where we have exceptional challenges in terms of funding. And we could then come up with recommendations to help the school boards make progress.
Donc, si c'est pas...
But if it's not by the end of June, with some urgent meetings, when will it be? In September? Well, you know that it's a minority government, and there are never guarantees with a minority government. And we are 2.5 years into this term, even more. And someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but the longest minority government has been, what, 3 years? So this is where we are. The other day I talked about the shirts, and today I talked about the flashlights on your phones, which might guide you when you're out and about at night. But what I'm saying is really serious. When will we hear from preschool organizations? When will they be able to share their point of view with us? Because they've never been part of the continuum. And finally, they are seeing light at the end of the tunnel. They're very excited to have this opportunity to come and present their points of view. They are very excited because they know how the procedure functions. If they can come here and contribute, then that will be part of the recommendations, be part of the report, and that will help the governments find solutions. This is what's at stake here. So how do we extend our hand to our colleagues with this amendment today?
No, je pense...
And now we were, referring to another amendment that was in our jurisdiction. But then we're being asked to support theirs. But how can I ask an individual or a group to do something that is not a part of our responsibility? It's similar to saying to someone, go and play in my neighbor's playground. Am I entitled to do that? No, I am absolutely not. I can invite them to play in my playground, but not in my neighbor's playground. And that's what I'm being asked to do. So how can we support a motion that is not in our powers to be able to do anything? And I want to congratulate you, Chair, because you assessed the situation and you refused to accept this. Because how can you grant somebody the powers when they don't have those powers? So it's odd that Mr. Beaulieu moves that motion, because there's no one around this table that talks more about jurisdiction than the Bloc. Every day in the House of Commons chambers, the Bloc reminds us to not go and play or not to go and work in their jurisdiction. Now, I mean, I'm not in agreement with that, much as I respect jurisdictions and the powers of provinces and territories. And believe me, I do want to respect those. But, Canada is Canada. You have to make sure that everyone enjoys the same rights. So if we're going to invest in physicians and health care, and we say, well, we want to, increase the support for physicians in your province by 25%, then we have to make sure that in addition to all the province, Quebec also adds 25% if funds are going to be invested there in health. So you see where I'm going with this, Chair, because Quebecers are also entitled to getting more physicians. But if you say, we're going to give you millions, maybe even billions, and you just do whatever you want with that, no. That is not leadership at the level of the federal government, because the federal government has responsibilities and to see to it that people in Quebec and New Brunswick and Manitoba and elsewhere in Nova Scotia, for instance, and I'm talking here about an island right next to Cape Breton, and you have very proud Acadians living there. 18% of Acadians who have survived all of the challenges, just like preschools, just like school boards. And you need to understand that I have lived in communities where I did my schooling from kindergarten right through to high school in English. Why? Why did I study from kindergarten through to high school in English? Because I had no other choice. What does he mean by saying there was no choice? In life, you always have choices. Well, we had no rights. They were not respected. If it hadn't been for the soldiers who defended the French language, my own children would have not had the choice, and my grandchildren would not have had any choice. However, there are people around this table and people who've sat here before us. My colleague talked about his father, Mr. Serré, about how his father had contributed, collaborated, and worked with organizations to advance the francophonie, to have French schooling. And I keep coming back to this because it's very personal for me. I was not able to go to a French school because there were no French schools on Ile Madame. All of my schooling, from kindergarten through to second year. And then I said to myself, oh, I have a choice. I can continue my studies in English, or I could choose a French or Francophone university, which is exactly what I chose. I didn't have many choices because, as my colleague MP Beaulieu knows, we do not have enough Francophone universities across Canada. But I had two choices close by, and there were other choices. But my first choice was to go to Sainte-Anne University. And I did go back and do a master's there subsequently. But at the time, I didn't make that choice because I would have had to travel a 7-hour car ride to go to that university and 7 hours to come back. So I decided to go to Moncton University, which was only 4 hours away by car. And I believe, Chair, you did your studies at Moncton University, a very well respected Francophone institutions, and 40% of the university student population while I was studying were Quebecers. And you wonder why? Well, they had a choice. They could save a year of schooling instead of doing their 2 years of CEGEP. So it's about choice. The Conservatives have a choice to support my amendment. I had no choice regarding French schooling. But because of my father and because of many other people in the province of Nova Scotia who defended the cause, and this in Nova Scotia, 96, a very important year for Canadians in Nova Scotia and all Francophones, because at last the government, well, actually, it was a Liberal government. I just wanted to mention that. You know, not to say because, you know, Nova Scotia has treated Acadians well. But in 1996, someone saw the light and gave Acadians the power to control their destiny when it comes to education. And for the very first time, they were entitled to manage their French schools, their French education across the province. Powerful, powerful, powerful. Because it's a bit like the provinces. You know, the Anglophones, you know, could give Francophones a few crumbs, a few drops of water, a few classrooms here and there. So, a point of order, Mr. Beaulieu. Maybe I wasn't clear enough the last time, and I make my apologies to Mr. Hausfire, but I would like my colleague to come back on topic. It's not a point of order, Mr. Beaulieu, but I respect. Now, Mr. Sanson, this is about the history of choice or no choice. Now, with regard to this motion, there is a choice. I see the connection. I don't see why you don't see it, but I'm accepting the debate and Mr. Sanson's comments on his own motion. Point of order. We've already heard from Mr. Godin saying that there will be no apologies on a point of order. It's very clear on that. Now I'm trying to see here. Is it allowed to, apologize on a point of, let me report. It is not, what Mr. Beaulieu just said is not a point of order. And I did, recognize that he did it, but it was not a point of order. So thank you anyway, Mr. Beaulieu. And we're listening to Mr. Sanson about the ability to make a choice or not in life and to see the choices with regarding this amendment. Mr. Sanson, you have the floor. Well, that is the connection. Choice. The members of the opposition have a choice. They have the choice to get back to work and support the communities across Canada. And I will repeat, I had no choice about French schooling. But good news, my 3 children did their entire schooling from kindergarten right through in French. Completely. They had a choice. Maybe it was somewhat limited because of their dad and because, of all of their friends. Maybe by 9th, 10th, 11 years, they would have liked to go and study where all their friends went. So we had to have some very courageous conversations. And the conclusion was, you can go and study wherever you want after your 2nd year. But for now, what you're getting a quality French education. And they were able to take advantage of that. And now I'm going to continue on the matter of choice. And I'm thinking about my grandchildren. I have 5 grandchildren. Imagine the young man that I am with 5 grandchildren. Mr. Sanson, if you'll allow me, I'd like to interrupt you, given the hour. And I would like to tell you that for all those who are listening to us, because now we're being televised. It's not just, it's not televised. Sorry, I'm being corrected. It's webcast. But we have image, not just audio. So I'm going to tell you what the chair's intention is by the end of day. I've consulted my colleagues, and I'd like this to be in the minutes and said publicly, for administrative reasons and technical reasons that do not concern the members who sit on this committee. But when we suspend a meeting rather than adjourn it, it causes rather tricky problems. So I'm going to adjourn this meeting. And before I adjourn, I would like to say the following. I interrupted Mr. Sanson in his, and on my list I have Mr. Sanson, Mr. Beaulieu, second turn, Mr. Iacono, who had his hand up. We saw it virtually, and Mr. Seri. That's what I have on my speakers list, and that's the order. I'm going to adjourn. I'm going to prepare the notice of meeting. For Monday next, we were to welcome the Official Languages Commissioner. I just want to remind you what we discussed a few meetings ago. It was scheduled for an hour and a half. We said maybe an hour is enough. 2 hours is too much, so we said an hour and a half. And then we would come back to study the version of the report. Instead of that, on the notice of the meeting, we'll have the Commissioner of Official Language for the first and after, and then we'll resume this debate. If the committee wants to do something else, we will follow our rules of procedure. I hope this is satisfactory for everyone. I want it to be transparent. I cannot suspend for technical reasons. I am going to go about this in a way that it meets the needs of all of the support systems that are in the background. So I'm going to adjourn. We will be welcoming the Commissioner of Official Languages and accompanied by his officials, who are Mr. Leduc and Mr. Wilf. first hour and a half. After that one, if we have enough with 1 hour with the commissioner, then we'll finish with 1 hour. We'll see. And then immediately after, rather than study the report, we will reconvene this with this order: Sanson, Beaulieu, Iacono, and Mr. Serré. Point of order. Mr. Sanson, go ahead. Will the opposition confirm now, in looking at this light, that we will be welcoming the commissioner? Because I so much want to. Yes, there is a consensus. We've talked about this before the meeting, but it was in camera before we went public. So I want everyone who's listening to us know how things will unfold. It's a way of saying indirectly that I'm not going to repeat. We're adjourning. We'll welcome the commissioner, and then we'll reconvene. Meeting adjourned.